Now, the final day of the closely watched Australia visit, the Indian Prime Minister has held formal discussions with his Australian counterpart Anthony Albanese. The two leaders discussed regional security and economic ties between India and Australia. And what is interesting is that they've also signed a migration deal that is aimed at boosting Indian students and business travel to Australia. They've also discussed the impact of the Russia-Ukraine war on developing nations, particularly with regards to food and energy security. Listen in.
मेरे मित्र पीएम अल्बनीज़ी की भारत यात्रा के 2 महीने के भीतर मेरे यहाँ आना हुआ है। पिछले 1 साल में यह हमारी 6ठी मुलाकात है। यह हमारे व्यापक संबंधों की गहराई, हमारे विचारों में गवर्नेंस तथा हमारे सहयोग की मैच्योरिटी को दर्शाता है। अगर क्रिकेट की भाषा में मैं कहूं तो हमारे संबंध T20 मोड में आ गए हैं।
Now, besides trade, migration, renewable energy also found a mention in the meeting between the two leaders. Now, India and Australia have established a hydrogen task force to expand cooperation on clean energy. And this is the second time that the Indian leader has visited Australia since taking the prime ministerial office. His last visit had come 9 years ago, back in 2014.
I'm pleased to meet Prime Minister Modi so soon after our productive meeting in Hiroshima for the 2023 Quad Leaders Summit. Quad leaders stand together for an open, stable, secure and prosperous Indo-Pacific region. A region where sovereignty is respected and all countries, large and small, benefit from a regional balance that keeps the peace.
And Australia has announced that it will be opening a consulate in Bengaluru this month. Now, the announcement has come just hours after the Indian Prime Minister said that India will establish a similar mission in Brisbane as part of the efforts of the two nations to enhance bilateral ties.
Friends from media.
The Sydney Harbour Bridge is in Indian tricolour. This, even as the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit is underway. He has his last engagement, the dinner at the Opera House. And of course, we know that last 2 days have been hectic but productive in many senses. Both the leaders held political conversations where they found convergences on issues like Indo-Pacific trade and security as well. But essentially, we know that the diaspora event was a showstopper with the Indian Prime Minister addressing almost 20,000 members of the Indian diaspora along with the Australian Prime Minister, who termed the Indian Prime Minister as a boss. But all in all, a proud moment for India-Australia relationship and of course symbolic of how relationship is going forward. With video journalist Sanjeet Siddhansival for WION in Sydney, Australia.
What is interesting is that during the talks, the Indian Prime Minister also raised the issue of pro-Khalistan activities in Australia with Albanese. And besides this, he also brought up the issue of certain incidents of vandalism that have taken place on Hindu temples.
ऑस्ट्रेलिया में मंदिरों पर होने वाले हमलों और अलगाववादी तत्वों की गतिविधियों के संबंध में हमने पहले भी बात की थी और आज भी हमने बात की है। भारत और ऑस्ट्रेलिया के सौहार्दपूर्ण रिश्तों को कोई भी तत्व अपने विचारों या अपने एक्शन से आघात पहुंचाए, ये हमें स्वीकार्य नहीं है।
Remember, these bilateral talks have happened after a crowd of thousands upon thousands of members of the Indian diaspora had cheered the Indian Prime Minister at an outstanding and a remarkable event that was held in Sydney's biggest sporting arena. Now, the Australian Prime Minister also accompanied the Indian Prime Minister, and he referred him to the boss, comparing him with an American artist Bruce Springsteen, where the Australian Prime Minister also went on to state that the reception and the love and affection that was shown by the members of the Indian diaspora for the Indian Prime Minister was quite remarkable, and probably even Bruce Springsteen did not get the kind of reception that the Indian Prime Minister did. And also my colleague Siddhant Sibal is joining us for more on this. Siddhant, of course, has been tracking the developments very, very closely for us. He's joining us live from Sydney. Siddhant, this, of course, is a crucial visit by the Indian Prime Minister to Australia. Give us an upshot in terms of what are the big takeaways from this important visit by the Indian Prime Minister to Australia.
Well, yes, Mohammed, the Indian Prime Minister got a rock-star welcome in Sydney, and as he left, there was a spectacular show of lights at the Sydney Harbour Bridge with the Harbour Bridge lit up in Indian tricolours. A lot of outcomes, whether it's trade and economics or defence and security. We saw the Indian Prime Minister focusing on areas like trade, talking about free trade agreement negotiations. Remember, June and July are expected to see key negotiations on free trade agreement. India and Australia had last year signed the ECTA Pact, and now they are paving way for a larger free trade pact. But one important MOU that was signed today was the Mobility Pact that paves way for legal migration of Indians from India to Australia. That is a very positive development for many Indians who would like to come to Australia and work. But essentially, the showstopper event was the diaspora event that took place yesterday, as the Australian Prime Minister termed Narendra Modi as the boss. And Prime Minister Narendra Modi, of course, talked about the popularity Prime Minister Albanese enjoys, and of course highlighted the role India plays in global governance architecture. But all in all, this visit leaves an indelible mark on the growing relationship between India and Australia, where both countries looks like to have found common grounds on several issues.
Absolutely indeed, Siddhant. Thank you very much indeed for joining us and getting us all those insights there.